All right. Um, Hi, welcome back. I'm here with Matt Scott, the Associate Head of School at Avenue Shenzhen, and we're talking about schools and organizations that have been able to thrive through the pandemic to create the type of learning that our children both need and deserve to author the world that we want. So welcome, Matt. Go ahead and tell us a little bit about
Here.
yourself and a little bit about Avenues.
Sure. So my name's Matt Scott. Like I said, I'm associate head of school here in Avenue Shenzhen. I've been with the organization now for 5 years. And I've worked in education design on our New York campus, and then I moved out here a year ago to get our first China campus open. So Avenues is a world school. We have campuses in major cities around the world. Presently, we have campuses in New York City, which was our first one, Sao Paulo, Brazil, Shenzhen, Silicon Valley will be opening in about a year from now. And then a couple of years ago, we started an online campus as well, which I hope we have a chance to talk about because that's been really interesting in this particular time. We're sort of a forward-looking school that tries to take the best of what we've learned in the last 30 years about how human beings learn and apply that to schools and create new models so that we can create worldwide leaders who can understand and solve global scale problems.
Yeah, I mean, the world needs a new generation of global leaders, and I should say that Matt and I know each other from me living in Shenzhen and doing work with the local education bureau, and then later working at another local private school, and really respect the model, the vision, and the execution of what Avenues is doing. So before we get too much into before we go too deep into some of the aspects of schooling and organizational learning and things like this, school and education is really about humanity, about people connecting with one another, and about creating a community. And so I imagine that this pandemic has been a really emotional experience, for you personally and professionally. You mind sharing just a little bit about what it's been like for you being in China, and how the organization has maybe worked to support you and to accommodate you at work?
Yeah, so we had plans to leave to go on vacation actually right as Chinese New Year, and that was right when the pandemic was really taking off here, and so we it was planned on being out of China for about 2 weeks, and it turned into 2 months. And we were sort of stuck in Southeast Asia. But early on, I think the organization had some important decisions to make, because obviously, there were sort of some conflicting priorities or apparently conflicting priorities, right? Where it was really important to us that we're taking care of our people first and foremost, and so there was a big desire to support our foreign teachers in getting home to a place where they felt safe and that they could be with their families for an extended period of time if need be. And so we made a decision to support them in that, and we sent them all home. Obviously, the conflict there is we knew that meant we were going to be unsure when people were going to be able to return to China, and of course that sort of played out that way. Now that we're looking at 6 months later, and we still have people who can't get back to their homes here in China. But first and foremost, I think we were guided by our values there of welcome, safety, respect, and we if we thought it was very important to first take care of our people and ensure that they're safe and feeling respected, and then the rest of it we can deal with.
Oh, sorry, you froze there for a second. I apologize.
No, sorry. I'm having
Yeah, and then
internet.
yeah, and that's that well-being, and we might come back to this. That just ensuring the well-being of the people in the organization, from the faculty to the students to the families that are part of that community. It's something that has shined through in a lot of these conversations, that that those needs have to be met. And it sounds like that Avenues, made the courageous decision, or what some might think to be a courageous decision, to send people home in that uncertainty, but really out of the respect and safety for them to do that.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
the other thing I'll just sort of mention there, that it certainly comes from our organizational values, but there's also, when we think about organizational strategy, it's very much aligned with our approach. So I'd say that the number one thing that Avenues is focused on is organizational health and colleague engagement. And so we have sketched out, we've used a concept called in for-profits, it's called the service profit chain. We call it the service value chain here, but the idea is that successful organizations really start with healthy sort of colleague engagement, really high-performing employees who like to be there every day, who are doing their best work. And if you take care of that, then everything else comes, right? Then they'll come up with the solutions to the curriculum. They will engage families. They'll engage students. Students will have amazing learning experiences. And somewhere down the line, at the end of the day, you have really thriving full schools that are expanding and helping us meet our mission. But it all comes back. Everything we do is first and foremost focused on ensuring that this is an amazing place to be and that people can do their best work every day. And so, when we are presented with a situation of, do we try to keep everyone here so that we're ready from day one, or do we decide to make a decision that is healthy for our colleagues? We'll always choose the option that's supporting our colleagues.
Yeah, like you said, putting people first, or you're taking care of your people. So I'm curious though, right? You talk about that when you're taking care of the people in the school, that changes a little bit when people, or maybe it changes a little bit when people are spread out all over the world, and you're a school that's a network of schools. And so what did that, once you made those decisions in China, what did the school's initial response look like in terms, for teaching and learning at the other, throughout the network? If you can speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, maybe I can start with China, and then we can talk a little bit more about what that looks through the network.
Yeah.
So, here in Shenzhen, we had a deliberate strategy to start slow. And so instead of opening a full campus, we just opened a kindergarten last year. And so talk about why we did that. But so what that meant is we had students who were aged 2 through 5 here. And so for us, we didn't necessarily feel good about running the same playbook that a lot of other schools were, which was, hey, we don't know how long this is going to be. Let's start leveraging some of our existing tools to switch to online instruction. Like, we just didn't really feel like that was developmentally appropriate for 2 to 5 year olds. Certainly not sort of done on the fly. Like, if we're going to construct that online experience, it needs to be done in a really, really thoughtful way for that particular age of learner. So what we did was we made an immediate decision to change our school calendar. So what we did was we essentially declared summer vacation in early February. And so we said February and March, this is summer. And we just totally shut things down. So we had no expectations of teachers. that they would be creating content for kids, that they'd be doing any sort of online instruction. And then our plan was to open again in early April and then extend the school year through the end of July. And so that's where we're at, right? It's July 9th as we speak today, and we're still in school for another 4 weeks. And so, we felt like that was a win for both our parents as well as for our team, because during those early days when there was just a lot of panic and uncertainty, teachers were really able to take some time to get back where they needed to be and not focus on school, but focus on their families instead.
I mean, that's a really unique response to this, when a lot of other schools were racing to get online, that you sort of hit pause, reorganize things, right? Being mindful of the needs of the youngest learners, right, in the school system.
What was so cool about it, it was an idea that we came up with because we thought it was kind of like an elegant solution to a number of problems, that faced our unique school. But I was really, concerned to make sure that this was something that our teachers were really going to be supportive of, because this meant that they were going to have to stay, through another month that they didn't intend necessarily to be here. And to a person, the response was, wow, that sounds amazing for our kids. I totally get why we're going to do this. I'm all in, and some people had some prearranged plans that we had to work through, but we were just going to, one of our valued behaviors is adaptability here. And so we were just going to be adaptable and be transparent with our families about the situation. And so it's overall, I think, been a really positive for our community to be able to shift the calendar like that.
Yeah, and so your other campus, so in China, things, this pandemic hit there first, and school closures hit there first, and then that happened in the United States, and it's still happening in the United States, and it's happening in Brazil. So, were there things that you learned from what happened in Shenzhen that you were able to transfer to these other campuses, or or maybe just speak a little bit to what those initial responses looked like in those other places in the world?
Yeah, we had a really different response in the other places in the world, and a lot of it had to do with sort of the here in China, we got sort of a message early on that we had a sense that it was going to be a prolonged closure, and that we knew that kindergartens were going to be the last to reopen. So it sort of moved us towards some bolder options like the change in the calendar. Mm-hmm. In a place like New York, it was really different, where it sort of snuck up on everyone there in New York City in particular. Like the epidemic just exploded pretty quickly. And so, we even sort of went into a week expecting to have a full week of school before spring break. And midweek, we decided to pull the plug. And I think we didn't have school on Thursday and Friday. And so it was a very different response. New York, I can talk about the plan for or what happened last year, and then at some point we can talk about what's going to happen in the future. New York took more of a traditional approach, where we switched to online learning after spring break. We gave parents an interesting choice, though, where they had the option of transferring over to avenues online, with under the condition, though, that they couldn't return to New York for that year. It sort of needed to be an all-in decision there, because we needed to make sure that we were allocating our resources in a way. We couldn't sort of have people bouncing back and forth. So New York ran a program similar to what I think a lot of schools are doing, a lot of online instruction, a lot of sort of offline projects that kids were doing. But then we ended our school year early. And then we went into what we ended up calling our phase 3. There were sort of 3 different phases of online instruction there, but I think phase 3 is really interesting. We knew that parents now had been with their children at home for a long time, and really sort of had come to in a lot of ways rely upon the experiences they were getting with their teachers in New York. So we wanted to continue that in some way. And so we launched this phase 3, which was three 2-week modules that were completely interest-driven courses that would take place over the course of the summer. So right now, I think we're in the 3rd module. So teachers proposed, I think we had like 400 different courses or something that were available to families, all teacher-driven. So, upper school one might look like science fiction and futurism, because a teacher is interested in that. And all of this was put together by our extended learning team, which is the team that manages summer school. They manage after school programs, so that our core leadership team could kind of focus on other things and focus on getting the school ready for the next year. And so that team swept in, created this big phase 3 online program, and been massively enrolled. We've had to add extra sections, and so I think that's been something that's kept our families very happy.
Yeah, so I wanted to ask you how the school had to reorganize itself to deliver remote learning. But what I'm hearing maybe a little bit is that Avenues as an organization already had some pieces in place, and you activated those in some different ways, maybe.
Yeah, right. So Avenues is an interesting place that a couple years ago, we spent a lot of time sort of clarifying who we are, why we exist, and what we do. And one of the things that we came out of that experience with is a sense that we are interested in providing transformative learning experiences to students. And part of that is going to be that we're going to run some schools, right? But that's not the only way to have a transformative learning experience. And so, we've put a ton of effort into building overseas studies programs for kids, because those can be incredibly transformative experiences. But we've also built the Avenues Online program because we realize that's another way that we fully believe that students can have transformative learning experiences on an online environment, particularly if it's well designed and thoughtfully put together. So we definitely had some pieces in place that helped us a lot, because we didn't view ourselves as just being a school. Mm-hmm. It's more focused on what the kind of learning experience is that we want for children.
Yeah, so there was a lot of capacity to take on, that as the notion of school changed, you had the capacity to say to take on learning in lots of different ways, because the school was already focused. Avenues as an organization already had a much broader conception of what school, right, might be. Mm-hmm. I'm curious though, because there's sort of the hardware piece of it, right? The nuts and bolts of the organization, but there's also that software, and maybe the mindsets and dispositions of people in the organization. What do you think, allowed this reshuffling, or maybe this reorganizing to go forward smoothly in such in a way that supported all the learners, that supported the faculty, and that made sense for the organization?
I mean, it all comes back to this concept of organizational health, that focus on people first. So, in addition to sort of clarifying who we are and what we do, we've been very clear about what our valued behaviors are. So we have 6 valued behaviors here, combination of humility and courage and leadership. And we have done a lot to align ourselves around those value behaviors in the way that we select teachers and staff members, and the way that we reinforce those value behaviors on campus and throughout our organization. So I'd say that is actually one of basically the primary selection criteria here is these 6 value behaviors. And they become really important to us and are driving the organizational culture. And I think this has been a moment where that focus on organizational health and values has paid huge dividends for us. So I think so far we've talked about what we're doing, how we responded this year. I think how we're responding into the fall is even more interesting, and really reflects our value behaviors. So one thing we've seen, like most schools around the world, is some higher attrition levels, right? And sort of lower new enrollments. And you see lots of families that are making some decisions based on health, financial concerns that are just causing them to sort of pause, take a year. And so in response to that, sort of we wanted to think really broadly about how we could continue to serve our families, even if they don't want to be in New York City in a brick and mortar campus with 1,700 other kids. And so the organization put together over like the course of a month, came up with a bunch of new programs that were finding new ways to serve kids. And so the first one is there's been a dramatic expansion of avenues online. So previously, we basically served kids in grades 6 through 12. And now we're going to be expanding that down through nursery. And so there's been a completely redesign of the curriculum, totally new approach to learning. And as a result, we've seen just explosive growth in our online campus. I think as a result, I think our enrollment would either be the same or go up over the course of the next year. Now, we've also found that some parents, they're interested in the online program, but particularly for those youngest learners, they have some concerns about their capacity to facilitate that learning. Mm-hmm. And so we're offering a program called Avenues at Home, where we find teachers who will be dedicated to individual families and will actually push into those homes to support the learning with the youngest students. So to sort of be powered by Avenues Online, but we'll supply the teacher and have all the health and safety protocols to make sure that that's a safe situation for the family. And then the third thing that we're doing is particularly in New York, where a lot of people have family or second homes in the surrounding areas, we're creating a satellite campus outside of the city. So we found a summer camp that we're converting into a mini campus. We originally expected to have 60 to 100 kids, and that also is we're seeing explosive demand for that. I think we're going to be able to bring in some new families to that program potentially. And so all of those things were put together in 2 months. But I think that's sort of a testimony to these value behaviors of resourcefulness, courage, adaptability, learning. And everyone just sort of rolled up their sleeves and they're like, okay, we're going to do this and we're going to come through this. And I've just been really proud of how the organizations responded to that.
Yeah, so in this time of great adversity, sort of I don't want to say returning because you hadn't left them, but really embracing those organizational values to not just keep business going as usual, but to come up with some really interesting, meaningful learning and new ways for your existing families, as well as a whole new range of learners for Avenues.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we think there's a lot of long-term benefits to this too. I think we've been big believers in online learning for a long time. When it's done right, we're big believers that you really can have a transformative learning experience and delivered online. And so, I think that we're going to be able to push that in some new and interesting ways, and we're going to have families who are more comfortable with that kind of learning experience now than they would have otherwise been. And I think that provides some amazing opportunities, right? I think you can imagine when we do reopen schools and get back into sort of a new world, that now all of a sudden families have had this experience of being online. Hey, we could do some more blended learning. not in a way that's focused on cutting cost, which I think is, unfortunately a lot of the way that blended learning has previously been implemented, but instead in a way that's focused on driving like new experiences with quality for kids, right?
Mm-hmm.
So maybe we have 6 kids globally who are particularly interested in biochemistry, right? And you wouldn't typically be able to offer a course on an individual campus, but now we could, sort of create some sort of biochemistry project over the course of the year that these kids could have. And that it just adds to the whole learning experience. And so I think that we're viewing this as this opportunity to just tear down some old paradigms and to really move forward into new ways of learning.
Yeah, I appreciate the distinction that you have Avenues Online and Avenues Online educators who I'm sure are who are well versed in online pedagogy and blended and maybe blended learning too. And you didn't just take your classroom teachers and then tell them to teach online, right? Because that's I think that you're exactly right that there are so many great opportunities for quality blended learning opportunities when done well. And I think that it can be a huge winner, for families, for households that saw quality online learning, that can be a huge winner, right? For families who saw online learning that was just classroom put on a computer screen, that can set back online and blended learning, 20, 30 years, a generation who said, I never want to do that again. So maybe, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's why we were really careful early on in New York to not say that we're just moving everyone to Avenues Online, because we weren't going to be able to give that level of online experience to families, right? If we were just taking teachers from New York who had no experience with online learning, didn't know the curriculum, didn't know how to design those sorts of online learning experiences, and then tell families, hey, this is Avenues Online, don't worry, that it really could have set us back quite a bit. We have we are really committed as an organization to following through on our commitments and doing everything very well at a high level. And so we wanted to offer that online experience to parents, but only if we could really deliver it at the level that we expected.
And so, I'm sure that Avenues means a lot more to your family, to your students, to your families, to your teachers than a place where reading, writing, math, are taught. Chinese, right, are taught. Right, it's a place that has meaning and purpose for everyone involved. I'm curious how this pandemic has maybe changed your school's purpose, what it means to its students, to its teachers, to its parents, and what that is now.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think, I mean, from a parent's perspective, I can definitely see how they now sort of get a little bit more how we've talked about, that we're focused on transformative learning experiences than running schools. I think many of our parents weren't particularly focused on some of the other aspects, like the online program that we were offering, some of the global experiences. And so I think that they're starting now to see that learning doesn't necessarily just happen within the walls of a school. Coming back to Avenues Shenzhen a little bit, I don't know how much it's really changed the purpose of school. We've now sort of recovered. Schools are open again here. We feel like we're moving forward. I'd say that everyone's response to reopening has been amazing. It's really brought out the best in everyone. So for those schools that haven't opened yet, I think they'll probably see the same thing. Parents were really flexible. Our teachers have been really flexible. I think one thing that we saw that was reminded us of how this is more than just a place of academics, of course, was, there was a period after we intended to come back, which was early April, until June 2nd, where schools still weren't open in China. And so we did move to an online program with our young kids here. But we were pretty clear from the beginning that the purpose of that was to maintain relationships between teachers and students. We wanted the kids to know that, hey, their teachers haven't really, they haven't left them. They still care about them. Still want to see their face all the time. That they care about how the students are doing. And that was sort of a deliberate approach to make sure that when we could return to campus, that those relationships were already in place, and we didn't have to go through another extended phase-in period, which is critical with those young kids. Those first couple of weeks of school, when they come in, there's lots of tears, lots of just getting used to classrooms, and that was really wonderful to see. When we came back, there were almost no tears, and kids immediately just went back into the regular day with the teachers that they'd seen. And so that was just really a nice way to remind ourselves of how important those relationships are in early childhood education.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, that's something that, the way that schools are connecting with their learners, it's, having to manufacture, in some sense, the casual interaction in the hallway, entering the classroom, seeing people in the lunchroom, all of these different things, that just how much all of that part of school goes into creating relationships and coming up with ways to keep that going, and to do it for students ages 2 to 5 is really impressive. Not only impressive, but also shows the forethought and planning for when things come back, or when the students come back, that that you had kept that foundation there.
Another interesting way that I'm sort of thinking about purpose is, like, take it from the teacher's perspective as well. That, we had a situation, particularly in the US, where our teachers were sort of in their homes, locked down for some period of time. Like New York, really, people were not venturing out for months and months on end. And mental health and connection and community was really critical for a lot of people at that time. And the school community became a really important center of connection for a lot of our staff. And so there was another group of our team that was really focused on finding ways to support our colleagues who were in that experience. So there was a lot of new affinity groups that popped up that were meeting, once a week or more on Zoom. There was, amazing book clubs that were happening. There were sort of mindfulness courses that were going on. And that's been really wonderful. And then, of course, in sort of the course of all of this, in the US at least, we had the George Floyd incident, and Black Lives Matter, and a real focus on equity has become important. And those groups, really, many of them sort of pivoted towards, thinking about how we can contribute to making America a better place. And so that's been a big focus for our community over the last couple of weeks as well.
Yeah, those the recent incidents with George Floyd and others, unfortunately, are just the most recent examples of longstanding inequalities in the U.S. And it's really gives me a lot of hope and encouragement to see so many people across society, and especially in schools, right, taking this chance to say, what can we do to be anti-racist, to be allies, to create an equitable and just system for everyone. And so it speaks to the quality of the folks that you have at Avenues that amidst all of this, right, all of the struggles that people are going through, that they're still making sure to that they're still thinking about people who are facing even greater hardships. And so I'm curious, so what are what are some of the, recently and really throughout this whole time, what are some of the more creative practices that you've seen come out of remote learning that you're proud of and that you want to share with others?
I don't, this one might be one where I'm a little bit more further removed from some of the actual content that's happening, because, we pivoted pretty quickly back into being, at school on campus here in Shenzhen. So that might be somewhere where I could direct you to some folks in the United States who are a little bit more familiar with the actual practice and content. I mean, a couple things I can definitely point to is the phase 3 work that they're doing in New York is really interesting, because I think engagement is just so critical. We believe that that's critical on campus. I think it's even more important in an online setting. And so really creating courses that are, focused on student interest, really, subjects that and teacher interest, right? Because teachers, when they're really engaged in a topic, can just, can really bring kids to be interested in something they had no clue that they were going to be interested in. So I think the big focus on engagement has been a big one. I mean, Avenues Online is a whole nother thing we could talk about sometime, because it's really interesting. It's a project-based approach to online learning for the most part. So there's some synchronous classes that are a little bit more traditional, like some of our math experiences or this problem-based mathematics, and it requires a bunch of people to kind of be together at the same time to make it happen. But a lot of the work of Avenues Online is sort of giving kids challenges, sort of these big interdisciplinary projects, giving them a lot of resources to work through. And then teachers really play a role of mentoring them through it. So the kids will, have a check-in, show some work. Teachers will give feedback, send them in a different direction. Kids will present the final project. The teacher will say, not yet. Here's 3 or 4 things that you haven't thought about. Can you go back and fix this? And so I think that structure of Avenues Online is a really interesting way of thinking about it. Sort of, you have to sort of think about it, not sort of that your job is to deliver content to kids, but to sort of curate a learning experience that a student can go through. Some of it online, but a lot of what they're going to be doing is offline, working through sources and putting together projects.
And that's a big challenge that a lot of schools, have shifted to, whether in practice or in rhetoric, right, being more project-based learning or problem-based learning. And then when things went online, they didn't know how to do that. A lot of folks, right, and they struggled with that transition, and were able to learn along the way. But again, I think that's a great example of doing online learning well, and not just transferring on campus to online in the same way.
We're really hopeful then that also we've been developing these great projects that are engaging kids at home, and we're getting lots of feedback on them. We're tweaking them, we're improving them. And we're really hopeful that I think the next step is to take some of those greatest hit projects and bring them back into the classroom on our campuses. Because there's no reason you can't do the same projects there. They're interdisciplinary, they're aligned with our curriculum. And it sort of, can support teachers who may be less familiar with project-based learning. When you sort of give them something that's kind of put together and show them some exemplars, it helps lead them in that direction. And it starts to build that consistency across all of our campuses, which we want them to be very different, but we do want kids to be able to move from program to program, whether it's from one campus to another, from a campus to online. And so, when all those kids have had some common learning experiences, and everyone can point back to the time in third grade when they had to invent their own animal to overcome some sort of environmental challenge. Like, that's really cool when kids around the world are sharing those learning experiences.
Yeah, no doubt. And it's, it really does make Avenues a world school in that regard. I want to ask you, about, that when things go back, quote, to normal, to our next normal, and all of the different, all the changes and reorganizing or shuffling pieces around, through all that, what do you want to stick, right? What do you hope sticks around when things are back to that normal, hopefully, right, in the US this fall?
I hope there's a lot of, I don't know what's going to stick. We're trying a lot of stuff. And I think this is a great opportunity to try some things that we've wanted to for a long time. So I think one of the big problems with education is it's inherently conservative. I don't mean politically conservative. I just mean that there's some very conservative forces in that, as a parent, when you went through school, it looked a particular way. And when you're then selecting a school for your children, if it doesn't look the way that it looked for you, and hey, I as a parent turned out okay, so that must have been fine, you get like a little, is my kid being experimented on? And I think that that's one of the big things that's holding back education, right? Is like, parent choice is wonderful, but it's also, and it's not just parents, right? Like teachers, you also, like, as a teacher, you learned in a particular way in school and you sort of default to that. And so I'm really excited about this moment because it's really forcing us all to do things in a different way. And it's almost like hitting the reset button. And I don't know which practices are going to stick, but we're trying so many different things that we've been thinking about for a long time and have been unable to necessarily implement because they were perceived as a little bit too risky or out of the box. And I'll just give you one example that I'm like really excited about. For a long time in the upper division, we've been talking about how we believe that students would be better served if they had bigger unstructured parts of their day. And so if we could open up the school day, we could really get kids out of the school and into like meaningful learning experiences outside school, that whether that's a very intensive arts program or an internship or some real world experience. It could also open up time for kids to pursue some sort of area of academic study in much greater depth. So coming back to our biochemists that we talked about earlier, those kids could then really take that time and focus deeply in that area with some resources that we provide or some mentors. So what's interesting is about this moment is when we think about reopening physical campuses in a way that decreases density of students, right? For sort of self and safety and health reasons. Mm-hmm. What that means is we're probably going to need to have students on campus less. And we're actually going to need to open up these big chunks of time in their schedule that they're going to be at home, somewhere else. And so I'm really excited that this is an opportunity for us to do the thing that we've been excited to do for a long time, but that we've been just a little concerned about how it's going to go over with our students and our families. So I hope that that's something that sticks, but there's so many other things we're trying. there's some hope now that, for instance, in our upper division math programs, that we're going to be shifting a lot of that online, and that could be a really interesting model just to perhaps keep some of that online. We're finding great ways for students to collaborate.
Mm-hmm.
Online tools really facilitate that in a nice way. So that might be something that sticks as well. We'll see.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's I'm noticing some overlap with some of these other conversations that I've been having. Kelly Grogan, who is at Chinese International School in Hong Kong, was she used the phrase that teachers, they were untethered from all of the things that they did before, and when all of those familiar footholds are no longer there, right, you're able to reach for something that maybe you were too scared to reach for before.
Mm-hmm.
And it sounds like this is people seizing the moment, taking advantage to try out these sorts of new projects that you've maybe been a little too conservative or too scared to give it a shot. And it's the same thing I heard at just yesterday. I spoke to Sandra Chow at Keystone Academy in Beijing. She's the director of innovation, and she's director of innovation and technology. I might have messed that title up, but and she said that they had been trying to roll out, that they'd been trying to do more blended learning, more technology integration, all these sorts of things, just new approaches to learning. And there was a lot of resistance when this happened. Optional trainings were full with 120 faculty, 100 faculty members, 120 faculty members who said, "Yeah, I'm ready now."
Yep.
It's almost paradox. In some ways, it's a paradox that with so much uncertainty around us, right, in our personal lives, for some people in their professional lives, that we're striving to do things new and different and better than we've done in the past.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and well, just a word. One of the things I'm a little worried about is this is the exciting moment in a way, right? Because we're designing and we're creating new things, and we're trying different ways of doing things. Like, so from an education perspective, I think it's an exciting moment. I think one of the things that's going to be the difficult is once things begin to return to normal, or there's the option of having them return to exactly the same way that they were before. How do we make sure that we're really learning from what we've done and keeping these new and exciting practices that turn out just to be superior to our old ways, and not and sort of resist that temptation just to, okay, let's go back to the 8-block schedule, and kids are here from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. and that's going to be the hard moment, right? And that's where it's going to get uncomfortable, and it's going to take a lot of courage, and because there's going to be a number of people, from teachers to parents to students, who want to just go back to the way it was before.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so I'm curious: are there things that Avenues is maybe doing to document some of these superior outcomes? And what might some of those things look like?
Yeah, I mean, so we touched a little bit on the curriculum work that's happening that I'm really excited about, and I think so we'll be documenting that quite a bit, and that'll be something that lives beyond this period of time. I think one of the other things that I think is kind of a fun thing for us is we have globally a central research and development department that actually does, we do like our own studies internally. We have a whole research program, involves tons of quantitative research, through surveys and so on and so forth. We also do a lot of qualitative research where we work with teachers to design pilots and test those out. So we made some big changes to the programs over the year by like sort of running some studies within the school. So I know that team is very engaged right now and looking at all these new practices and seeing what we can pull out. So I think that team will really take the lead on that.
That's great, and it's exciting just to know that there are organizations, there are people doing all this great work to reimagine what learning can be for for students and for communities. And so, Matt, I want to thank you for taking the time to share what this has looked like at Avenues. There are a lot of people are going to learn from this, but thank you for being a torchbearer to reimagine schools.
Thanks for having me today. I'm really looking forward to this project and look forward to seeing what comes out of it. So good luck.
Great, thanks.